Goku and friends make a return in Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, an action RPG that goes far beyond what you'd expect in its technology. Now 2 years on from Dragon Ball FighterZ, a pure-blooded fighter from developer Arc System Works, this is a very different use of Unreal Engine 4. Let's cast our minds back then. In FighterZ, we have one of the most authentic looking anime recreations ever made. Using perspective adjusted lighting, cell shading, and frame rate adjustments to match the style of the show, it sets a high bar in simulating the animation all in real time. It's curious then that the same engine returns in Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, but with such different results. Developer Cyberconnect 2 is at the helm here and taking an entirely different focus to the project. Technically speaking and in overall design, the direction it takes is fascinating. First off, Kakarot isn't just a game of combat, though that really does form a big part of it. Cyberconnect 2 is best known for its Naruto Ninja Storm series. Vibrantly animated, arena-based 3D fighting games built on its own tech, the team showed a flair for capturing the over-the-top moves of each character. You can feel that legacy pass right on in Kakarot, even with the jump to Unreal Engine, though with key additions. Battles, for example, are handled in a similar over-the-shoulder view, but now there's a greater sense of verticality. Fighters duke it out mid-air, teleport, and charge across the skies at pace. The camera can struggle, in all honesty, when you're right below an opponent, but the fact is this 3D battlefield makes it truer to how fights unfold in the anime. You have plenty of options up there too. Ki blasts, melee combos, charging, guarding, and of course, special attacks triggered through the L1 button. In full motion, yes, it's a lot to take in. Over time though, you do get to understand the rock, paper, scissors nature of all the moves. It slots together. The move to Unreal Engine has seemingly been smooth for the team. Effects bombard the screen, and with ally characters involved, stood to run for upwards of 30 hours, depending on whether you tackle side missions, everything full world exploration, and between that, well, there's a focus on retelling the entirety of the original anime story. For the fans, that means everything from the SAIYAN saga right up to the finale with Boo is included. It's really a lot to cover, and sadly, I did see some noticeable shortcuts in getting from A to B in the plot. Not all cutscenes are of equal quality either, but more on that later. As a package, Kakarot is one of the most ambitious Dragon Ball titles to date. Despite the use of modern technology though, it actually does have some parallels with earlier games. There is a precedent already set for what it's aiming for. Going as far back as even the NES era, the anime has translated well to all sorts of genres, like Dragon Ball SHENRON no NAZO in 1986, a kind of brawler based on the original series. Later we had 2D fighters in the Street Fighter mold. The Super Butoden games on Super NES are a real highlight, and the console was pushed even harder with Hyper Dimension later in the generation. Developed by Bandai, it boasted brilliant, high quality sprites and even Mode 7 backdrops. Not an easy game to play, but visually it's one of the console's best looking games. And then we have the RPGs, an area in which Kakarot has most in common. Dragon Ball Z Super Saiyan Densetsu feels like a real point of inspiration for what we have today. Developed for Super NES again, it charted the same beats of the story as you'd expect, right down to the flight between islands to track down Raditz. Battles were handled in a turn-based fashion, but as a comparison point, it's fascinating to see that generation's approach